being mixed race, being light skin, fair skin, is actually in some societies seen as more prestigious because closer to the former colonial power, and it's a very ambiguous relation, and it goes back to today, obviously, because it dates back to slavery and it lives on. It's interesting that this week, no later than this week, L'Oréal actually said it would change the way it's presenting its skin products to say to not to mention whitening because of the political weight behind it. So I think that that legacy lives on, and it's a very very complex legacy, because it's both obviously sometimes these children were coming from rape, but also from love stories. It's also, if one wants to talk about colonialism and slavery, there's also all the cultural legacy that lives on both in Africa as well as in Europe. And I think that what is actually needed today is a more subtle reading, a more broad investigation of that past, probably because I sit on both sides. I would think that there is some positive, but I think that it's possible to discuss the positive aspects if one recognizes the suffering. You're talking about children being taken from their family, but it's also about being cut from their African heritage. It's also on the other side, being cut from their European heritage, being recognized as a European person from their father's side, if we're talking about that. And mentioning that, I would insist on the fact that we're talking about children being fathered by European men, because sexual relationships between an African man and a European woman would send a person to death. So it was a crime. And therefore, in a way, it's interesting to remember that mixed race people are in many countries seen as crimes. That's the title of Trevor Noah's book, where he explains that, for example, in South Africa, being mixed race was illegal.
Estelle, thank you very much indeed. Niagale, can I bring you in on the same topic? The way these children were treated clearly is, I think by anybody's standards, horrific. But clearly, for some good came out of it in spite of it all, but for others, lives were ruined.
Yes, I think, of course, it is one of the most important legacy. And here again, I think it is important to make a difference between the different regions in the continent. For instance, what happened in Lusophone countries, and which were under the rule of Portugal, was different from what was happening in the French colonial empire or in the British colonial empire. And the legacy are also different, and the métissage, the métis in Lusophone Africa are seen in different ways, sometimes as they have been seen in other parts of Africa.